The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Samuel Martinez unlocked the heavy wooden door of Martinez General Store. At 62, Samuel had owned this shop for nearly 30 years, watching the small town of Cedar Ridge grow from a handful of farms to a bustling community of 2,000 people. His weathered hands moved with practiced ease as he flipped the sign from closed to open and began his daily routine. Samuel was not a large man, standing barely 5 feet 8 inches tall with graying hair and kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Most people saw him as a gentle shopkeeper who knew everyone's name and always had time for conversation. What they didn't know was that Samuel carried secrets from his past, secrets that had shaped him into someone far different from the mild-mannered merchant he appeared to be. 25 years earlier, Samuel had been Sergeant Samuel Martinez of the United States Army Special Forces. He had served 3 tours in various conflict zones, where he had learned skills that had nothing to do with selling groceries and everything to do with staying alive. When he returned home, Samuel deliberately chose the quiet life of a shopkeeper, hoping to leave his military training behind. But some skills never fade. They just sleep until needed. The store itself reflected Samuel's attention to detail. Shelves were perfectly organized, prices clearly marked, and inventory meticulously tracked. Local customers appreciated his fair prices and honest business practices. Samuel knew Mrs. Peterson always needed extra help carrying her groceries to her car. He knew that young Tommy Williams was saving his allowance for a new baseball glove. He knew that the Johnson family was struggling since the father lost his job at the lumber mill. This Tuesday morning started like any other. Samuel arranged the fresh produce delivery, updated his inventory ledger, and prepared for another ordinary day. The bell above the door chimed as Mrs. Chen entered, looking for ingredients for her famous dumplings. Samuel helped her find everything she needed, their conversation flowing easily in the comfortable way of old friends. Around 10 o'clock, 3 strangers walked past the store window. Samuel noticed them immediately, his old training automatically cataloging details. The first man was tall and lean with a scraggly beard, wearing a black leather jacket despite the warm weather. The second was shorter but powerfully built, with tattoos covering his arms and a permanent scowl. The third seemed younger, maybe early 20s, with nervous energy and constantly moving eyes. Something about their behavior triggered Samuel's instincts. They moved with the careful awareness of people planning something. They studied the store's layout through the window, noting the cash register's position and the door locations. Samuel had seen this behavior before in very different circumstances, and it made his chest tighten with familiar tension. The men disappeared from view, but Samuel's unease remained. He continued serving customers while keeping part of his attention on the street outside. Mrs. Rodriguez came in for school supplies for her children. Old Mr. Thompson needed his weekly supply of pipe tobacco. Each interaction was normal and pleasant, but Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. During a brief lull in customers, Samuel walked to the back of the store where he kept his office. Behind a false panel in his desk drawer, he retrieved something he hadn't touched in over a year. The Colt .45 pistol felt familiar in his hands, its weight both comforting and troubling. Samuel checked the chamber and magazine with movements so automatic they seemed like breathing. 6 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. He slipped the weapon into the holster he still kept beneath his store apron, hoping he was being paranoid. The lunch hour brought its usual crowd. Construction workers grabbed sandwiches and cold drinks. Office workers from the nearby bank picked up snacks. Teenagers stopped by after school for candy and sodas. The normal rhythm of small-town life continued, but Samuel remained alert. His military training had taught him that danger often came disguised as ordinary moments. Around 2 o'clock, the 3 strangers reappeared. They walked past the store twice more, each time studying it more carefully. Samuel noticed the tall one pointing at the cash register while the muscular one nodded. The younger man kept checking his watch and looking up and down the street. Their reconnaissance was becoming obvious to anyone trained to recognize it. Samuel made a decision. He quietly asked his part-time employee, Jenny, to take her break early and suggested she walk to the coffee shop down the street. Jenny, a 19-year-old college student, didn't question the unusual request. She grabbed her purse and left through the back door, humming softly to herself, unaware that her boss had probably just saved her from witnessing something terrible. Alone in the store, Samuel positioned himself behind the counter where he had clear sightlines to both entrances and the street beyond. His breathing slowed and deepened, falling into patterns his body remembered from decades past. The familiar calm of pre-combat preparation settled over him, even as part of his mind hoped he was wrong about what was coming. At exactly 2:30, the three men entered his store. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully, a sound that now seemed almost mocking given the tension in the air. The tall man in the leather jacket smiled too widely as he approached the counter. The muscular one moved to Samuel's left, positioning himself near the side aisle. The young one stayed by the front door, his role clearly to watch for interference. Samuel's trained eye immediately assessed their positions and realized they had done this before. Their spacing was tactical, designed to control the space and prevent escape. The tall man's smile never reached his eyes, and Samuel could see the outline of a weapon beneath his jacket. This was not a spontaneous crime. These were professionals or at least experienced criminals who had planned this robbery carefully. The store fell into a strange quiet, as if the building itself sensed what was about to happen. Outside, normal life continued. Cars drove past. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Children played in a nearby park. But inside Martinez General Store, three dangerous men faced one shopkeeper who was far more than he appeared to be. Samuel's hand rested casually near his apron, inches from the weapon he hoped he wouldn't need to use. The tall man in the leather jacket approached the counter with deliberate slowness, his eyes never leaving Samuel's face. His smile remained fixed and cold as he spoke in a voice that carried the rough edges of someone accustomed to intimidating others. "Good afternoon, old man," he said, his tone mockingly polite. "Nice little place you got here." "Real cozy." Samuel nodded calmly, his hands remaining visible on the counter. "Thank you. Can I help you find something?" The man's laugh held no warmth. "Oh, you can definitely help us. See, we're having some financial difficulties, and we heard this was a friendly neighborhood store where folks might be willing to help out some travelers." Behind his glasses, Samuel's eyes remained steady, but his mind was working rapidly. The muscular man had moved closer to the side aisle, positioning himself where he could block any attempt to reach the back door. The young man by the front entrance kept glancing nervously at the street, watching for potential witnesses or police. Their coordination confirmed Samuel's assessment that they were experienced criminals. "I'm always happy to help customers," Samuel replied evenly. "What exactly did you have in mind?" The tall man's smile widened, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Well, we figured you might want to make a donation to our travel fund. You know, everything in that cash register would be a real nice start." Samuel's expression didn't change, but inside, a familiar coldness began to spread through his chest. It was the same feeling he'd experienced during his military service when situations turned deadly. His body was preparing itself for violence while his mind calculated angles, distances, and possibilities. "I see," Samuel said quietly. "And I suppose you're not planning to pay for this donation?" The muscular man stepped forward, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Listen, Grandpa, we're trying to be polite here. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Samuel's gaze shifted to the large man, taking in details that others might miss. The man was strong but carried extra weight around his middle. His stance suggested he relied on intimidation rather than actual fighting skill. More importantly, he was standing too close to the shelf of canned goods, which would limit his movement if things escalated. "My name is Samuel," he said calmly, "not Grandpa, and this is my store." The tall man's patience was clearly wearing thin. His hand moved inside his jacket, and Samuel caught the gleam of metal. "Look, Samuel, we can do this easy or we can do it hard. Your choice. But either way, we're leaving here with that money." Samuel's right hand moved almost imperceptibly closer to his apron. "How many stores have you robbed?" The question seemed to surprise the tall man. "What?" I asked. "How many stores you've robbed?" "You seem experienced at this." The young man by the door shifted nervously. "Come on, Jake, let's just take the money and go." Jake, the tall man, shot an angry look at his accomplice. Using names during a crime was a rookie mistake, and Samuel filed the information away. These men might be experienced, but they weren't professionals. That could work in his favor or make them more dangerous depending on how they reacted to pressure. "Shut up, Danny," Jake snapped. "And you, old man, stop asking questions and start opening that register." Samuel looked at the cash register, then back at Jake. You know, in all my years running this store, I've never been robbed. I was starting to think Cedar Ridge was too quiet for this kind of excitement. The muscular man took another step forward. Well, your lucky streak just ended. Now open that damn register before we lose our patience. Samuel's training kicked in fully now. He could feel his heartbeat steady and slow, his breathing becoming controlled and measured. His peripheral vision expanded, taking in the positions of all three men simultaneously. The tall man Jake was approximately 6 feet away, his hand still inside his jacket. The muscular man, who hadn't given his name yet, was about 8 feet to Samuel's left, partially blocked by the canned goods display. Danny, the nervous young one, remained by the front door but was shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. You know what's interesting? Samuel said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Most people think running a small store like this is boring. Same customers, same routine, day after day. Jake's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I'm talking about how people make assumptions. Like you three, for instance. You looked at this store and saw an easy target. An old man running a quiet shop in a small town. No security cameras, no armed guards, just an easy score. The muscular man growled. Get to the point, old man. Samuel's smile was thin and contained no warmth. The point is that assumptions can be dangerous. You assumed I was helpless. You assumed I'd be too scared to resist. You assumed wrong. Jake's hand started to move, pulling a snub-nosed revolver from inside his jacket. Enough talk. Open the register now or I'll put a bullet in you and open it myself. There's something you should know, Samuel said, his voice remaining perfectly calm even as he watched the gun clear Jake's jacket. Before I became a shopkeeper, I had a different job, a job that taught me some very specific skills. The gun was almost clear of the jacket now. In seconds, it would be pointing at Samuel's chest and the situation would change dramatically. But Samuel had been waiting for this moment, calculating the exact timing he would need. What kind of job? Danny asked from the door, his voice cracking slightly. Samuel's hand moved with liquid smoothness, years of training compressed into a single motion. I used to kill people for a living. The words hung in the air for a split second, their meaning registering on the faces of the three criminals just as Samuel's .45 cleared his apron. The Colt appeared in his hand with startling speed, rising to point directly at Jake's chest, before the taller man could bring his own weapon to bear. The store fell completely silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerated cases and the distant sound of children playing in the street outside. Jake froze with his revolver half drawn, his eyes wide with sudden understanding. The muscular man took an involuntary step backward, his confidence evaporating. Danny's mouth opened in shock, his hand reaching for the door handle. Now, Samuel said in a voice that carried the authority of command, I think we need to have a different kind of conversation. The tension in the store was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake stood frozen, his revolver halfway out of his jacket, staring down the barrel of Samuel's .45. The shopkeeper's transformation had been so sudden and complete that all three criminals were struggling to process what had just happened. Easy now, Samuel said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death situations. Nobody needs to get hurt here, but that depends entirely on the choices you make in the next few seconds. Jake's eyes darted from Samuel's face to the gun pointing at his chest. The weapon in Samuel's hands was rock steady, held with the practiced grip of someone who had used firearms professionally for years. There was no tremor, no uncertainty, just deadly competence. You're bluffing, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're just a shopkeeper. Samuel's smile was thin and cold. Am I? Look at my hands, Jake. Look at how I'm holding this weapon. Does this look like someone who's pretending? The muscular man near the canned goods took another step backward. Jake, maybe we should just leave. This ain't worth it. Shut up, Bull, Jake snapped, then immediately cursed himself for using another name. His attempt to maintain control was crumbling rapidly. Samuel filed away the second name while keeping his attention focused on the immediate threat. Bull and Danny, he said conversationally. And you're Jake, now we all know each other. That's progress. Danny by the door was practically dancing with nervous energy. Come on, guys, let's just get out of here. This is going wrong fast. Nobody's going anywhere just yet, Samuel said firmly. Jake, you're going to very slowly and carefully remove that gun from your jacket. Use just your thumb and index finger, and you're going to place it on the counter. Any sudden movements, and this conversation ends badly for you. Jake hesitated, his mind racing through options. The shopkeeper's weapon was already aimed and ready. His own gun was still partially concealed, and would take precious seconds to bring into firing position. Even if he was fast enough, which seemed unlikely given the older man's obvious training, Bull and Danny were positioned where they might catch stray bullets. I said slowly. Samuel repeated, his voice carrying a subtle edge that suggested his patience was not unlimited. Jake's hand began to move, extracting the snub-nosed revolver with exaggerated care. The weapon looked cheap and poorly maintained, the kind of gun bought from questionable sources for quick jobs. As it cleared his jacket completely, Samuel could see that Jake's hands were shaking slightly. Good. Now place it on the counter and step back. Jake complied, setting the revolver down with obvious reluctance. The moment the weapon left his hand, the power dynamic in the store shifted completely. Samuel was now the only armed person in the room, and everyone knew it. Bull, Samuel said without taking his eyes off Jake, you're going to reach very slowly into your pockets and remove any weapons you might have. Knives, guns, anything sharp or dangerous. Place them on the floor and kick them toward the counter. Bull's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. How did you know? Because I used to do this for a living, remember? You've got the build of someone who relies on intimidation, which means you probably carry a knife or brass knuckles as backup. Your left pocket is hanging slightly lower than your right, which suggests something heavy. Am I wrong? Bull grudgingly reached into his left pocket and produced a switchblade knife, placing it on the floor and kicking it towards Samuel as instructed. Anything else? Samuel asked. Bull hesitated, then pulled a set of brass knuckles from his right pocket, adding them to the collection on the floor. Danny, Samuel continued, your turn. The young man by the door looked like he might start crying. I don't have anything, I swear. I was just supposed to watch the door. Samuel studied Danny's face and body language, his trained eye reading the signs of truth. The young man was clearly the least experienced member of the group, probably brought along for his willingness rather than his criminal expertise. Turn around and put your hands against the door, Samuel instructed. Don't try to leave. Danny complied quickly, his hands trembling as he placed them flat against the glass door. Through the window, Samuel could see normal life continuing outside. A woman pushed a baby stroller down the sidewalk. An elderly man walked his dog. A delivery truck made its rounds. None of them had any idea what was happening inside the store. Now, Samuel said, his gun still trained on Jake, let's talk about why you chose my store. Jake tried to regain some composure. Look, man, we're sorry, okay? We'll just leave and forget this ever happened. Samuel shook his head. I don't think so. See, you've committed several crimes already. Attempted armed robbery, conspiracy, probably possession of illegal weapons. Walking away isn't really an option anymore. Bull shifted nervously near the canned goods. What do you want from us? Information, Samuel replied. How many other stores have you hit? How long have you been working this area? Are there more of you? Jake's jaw tightened. We don't have to tell you anything. Samuel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. Actually, you do. See, I spent 20 years dealing with people much more dangerous than you three. I learned techniques for extracting information that you really don't want me to demonstrate. The threat hung in the air, unspoken, but clearly understood. Bull swallowed hard, his earlier bravado completely gone. We hit 3 stores in the county over the past 2 weeks, Bull said quickly, ignoring Jake's angry glare. Small places like this. Easy targets. Bull, shut your mouth, Jake snarled. Shut up yourself, Bull shot back. You got us into this mess with your brilliant planning. Samuel watched the discord between the criminals with professional interest. Stress was breaking down their group cohesion, making them easier to manage. 3 stores in 2 weeks. What kind of money are we talking about? Danny spoke up from his position at the door. Maybe 2,000 total. Most small stores don't keep much cash around. So you're not exactly criminal masterminds, Samuel observed. More like desperate amateurs looking for quick cash. Jake's face reddened with anger and humiliation. We know what we're doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you walked into a situation you were completely unprepared for. You didn't scout properly, you don't know your target, and you have no exit strategy. Samuel's assessment was delivered with clinical precision, each word calculated to further undermine their confidence and coordination. His military training had included psychological warfare, and these skills were proving just as useful as his marksmanship. The sound of a car pulling up outside made everyone tense. Samuel glanced quickly through the window and saw Mrs. Peterson getting out of her sedan, her weekly shopping list in hand. "Well," Samuel said quietly, "it looks like we're about to have company." Mrs. Peterson's hand was already reaching for the door handle when Samuel made his decision. In one fluid motion, he reached beneath the counter and flipped the door lock, then turned the open sign to closed. The elderly woman looked confused and tried the handle, finding it locked. She peered through the glass, her eyes meeting Samuel's. Samuel forced a smile and mouthed, "Sorry, emergency," while gesturing apologetically. Mrs. Peterson, who had known Samuel for 15 years, immediately sensed something was wrong. Her face showed concern, but she nodded and walked back to her car, pulling out her cell phone as she went. "Smart move," Jake said sarcastically. "Now she's probably calling the cops." "Maybe," Samuel replied calmly. "Or maybe she's calling her daughter to complain about the store being closed early. Either way, it gives us some time to finish our conversation without involving innocent people." Danny's voice cracked from his position at the door. "How much time do you think we have?" Samuel considered the question. Mrs. Peterson was a cautious woman who would probably call the police if she suspected trouble, but she'd also want to be certain before involving law enforcement. 20 minutes, maybe 30 before anyone shows up to check on things. Bull wiped sweat from his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Look, mister, we didn't mean any harm. We're just trying to get enough money to get out of town." "Running from something?" Samuel asked, his tactical mind immediately picking up on the implication. The three criminals exchanged glances. Jake clearly didn't want to reveal more information, but Bull seemed ready to cooperate if it might improve their situation. "There's some people looking for us," Bull admitted. "We had a job go wrong about a month ago. Things got complicated." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of job?" Danny turned slightly from his position at the door. "We were supposed to pick up a package for this guy, deliver it across state lines. Easy money, no questions asked. But the cops were waiting when we got there." "Drug delivery," Samuel said. It wasn't a question. Jake's anger flared again. "We didn't know what was in the package. The guy said it was just paperwork." Samuel's expression showed he didn't believe that for a second. "And when the deal went bad?" "We ran," Bull said simply. "Left the package, left the money, just ran. But the guy who hired us, he wasn't happy about losing his merchandise." The picture was becoming clearer to Samuel. These weren't professional criminals or dangerous outlaws. They were three small-time crooks who had gotten in over their heads and were now desperately trying to raise enough money to disappear before their former employer caught up with them. "So you decided to rob small stores to raise traveling money," Samuel concluded. "It seemed easier than trying to find legitimate work," Danny said miserably. "Nobody wants to hire guys like us." Samuel studied the young man's face. Danny couldn't be much older than 22 or 23, with the kind of soft features that suggested he hadn't been involved in serious crime for very long. "How did you get mixed up with these two?" "Danny's my nephew," Bull said reluctantly. "Kid's been living with me since his parents died. I probably should have kept him out of this." The family connection added another layer of complexity to the situation. Samuel could see that Bull, despite his intimidating appearance and poor life choices, genuinely cared about the younger man. Jake, on the other hand, seemed to view both of them as expendable tools. "And you, Jake? What's your story?" Jake's jaw tightened. "None of your business." Samuel's voice took on a harder edge. "Actually, since you tried to rob my store at gunpoint, I think it is my business. You're obviously the leader of this little group." "Where did you meet Bull and Danny?" Bull answered before Jake could stop him. "County lockup about 6 months ago. Jake had some connections, said he could help us make some easy money when we got out." "Some easy money," Samuel repeated with dark humor. "How's that working out for you?" The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Their easy money scheme had led them into a situation far more dangerous than anything they'd planned for. Samuel could see the fear growing in their eyes as they realized how badly they'd miscalculated. "What happens now?" Danny asked quietly. Samuel considered the question carefully. From a purely legal standpoint, these three men had committed multiple felonies. They deserved to be arrested, tried, and sent to prison. But Samuel's military experience had taught him that sometimes the letter of the law and true justice weren't the same thing. That depends on several factors, Samuel said finally, like whether you're willing to make some changes in your lives. Jake's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of changes? The kind that might keep you alive long enough to see next Christmas, Samuel replied bluntly. You said people are looking for you. Professional people, I'm guessing, who don't take kindly to employees who lose their merchandise. Bull nodded grimly. They already found our old apartment. Landlord said 3 guys in suits came asking questions. Then robbing convenience stores for gas money isn't going to solve your problem. You need to disappear completely, and you need help doing it properly. Samuel's mind was working through possibilities. His military contacts included people who specialized in helping individuals start new lives when their old ones became too dangerous to maintain. It wouldn't be cheap or easy, but it was possible. Why would you help us? Jake asked suspiciously. We tried to rob your store. Because despite what you attempted to do here, I don't think any of you are truly bad people. Stupid, yes. Desperate, definitely. But not evil. Samuel lowered his weapon slightly, though he kept it ready. Danny, you're young enough to start over completely. Get some training, find legitimate work, build a real life. Bull, you've got family to think about. And Jake, whatever led you down this path, it doesn't have to be permanent. The offer hung in the air, unexpected and transformative. These 3 men had walked into the store expecting to commit a simple robbery and walk away with a few $100s. Instead, they found themselves facing a former soldier who was offering them something they'd never had before, a real chance at redemption. But redemption, Samuel knew, was something that had to be earned. And the cost might be higher than they were prepared to pay. Outside, another car pulled up. This time it was a police cruiser, and Officer Martinez, no relation to Samuel despite sharing a surname, was getting out to investigate Mrs. Peterson's concerned phone call. Officer Martinez approached the storefront with the casual stride of someone expecting to find nothing more serious than a shopkeeper who had closed early for personal reasons. Samuel watched through the window as the young officer cupped his hands around his eyes and peered through the glass, trying to see inside. Decision time, Samuel said quietly to the 3 men. Officer Martinez is a good man, but he's also a thorough cop. If I let him in here and tell him what really happened, you'll all be in handcuffs within 5 minutes. Jake's face went pale. But you said you'd help us. I said I might help you, depending on the choices you make. Right now you have one chance to show me that you're serious about changing your lives. Bull looked confused. What do you mean? Samuel nodded toward the weapons scattered on the floor. Officer Martinez is going to want to know why my store is closed and why I look like I've been in a tense situation. I can tell him I was cleaning my gun and had a small accident that shook me up. Simple explanation, nothing suspicious. Danny's eyes widened with understanding. You'd lie to protect us? I'd give you an opportunity to prove you deserve protection, Samuel corrected. But it comes with conditions. Officer Martinez knocked on the glass door, his expression showing mild concern. Samuel held up one finger indicating he needed a moment, then turned back to the 3 criminals. First condition, you leave Cedar Ridge immediately, and you never come back. Second, you contact the people I'm going to tell you about, and you do exactly what they say. Third, if any of you ever commit another crime anywhere, anytime, I will personally make sure you regret it. Are we clear? Jake struggled with the offer. Part of him wanted to accept, but his pride rebelled against being lectured by the man who had just humiliated him. What if we say no? Samuel's expression hardened. Then Officer Martinez gets the whole story, and you can explain to a judge why you thought robbing my store was a good idea. Your choice. Bull elbowed Jake roughly. Take the deal, you idiot. It's better than anything we had an hour ago. Another knock at the door, more insistent this time. Officer Martinez was beginning to look genuinely concerned. I need an answer now, Samuel said firmly. Danny spoke first. I accept. I don't want to do this anymore, Bull nodded quickly. Me too. And thank you. All eyes turned to Jake. His jaw worked silently as he fought with his pride and his fear. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Okay, but I still don't understand why you're doing this. Samuel moved toward the door, slipping his .45 back into its holster beneath his apron. Because 25 years ago I was young and angry and making bad choices. Someone gave me a chance to turn my life around and I took it. Consider this my way of paying that forward. He reached for the door lock, then paused. One more thing. The people who are looking for you? My contacts can help with that too, but it won't be free. You'll need to work, earn money legitimately, and pay for the services over time. No more shortcuts. Samuel unlocked the door and opened it with a smile that looked only slightly strained. Sorry about that, Officer Martinez. I was cleaning my pistol in the back office and had a small accident. Made me a little shaky, so I decided to close early and calm down. Officer Martinez, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, looked past Samuel into the store. His trained gaze took in the scene. 3 men who looked uncomfortable and nervous, some items scattered on the floor, and an atmosphere of tension that seemed out of place in the normally peaceful general store. Everything okay in here, Mr. Martinez? The officer asked, using the formal address despite their friendly relationship. Fine now, Samuel replied. These gentlemen stopped by to ask for directions. They're traveling through and got a bit lost. Officer Martinez's eyes lingered on Jake's nervous expression and Bull's intimidating appearance. Something felt off, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Danny, perhaps sensing the officer's suspicion, spoke up with surprising composure. Yeah, we're trying to get to the interstate. Mr. Martinez here was really helpful. Where are you folks headed? Officer Martinez asked casually. West? Bull answered quickly. Looking for work in the oil fields. It was a plausible story. Many young men traveled west seeking employment in the energy industry, especially when jobs were scarce in their hometowns. Samuel moved subtly to block the officer's view of the weapons still scattered on the floor. They were just leaving, actually. I gave them directions to the truck stop where they can get better maps. Officer Martinez nodded slowly. His instincts told him something wasn't quite right, but he had no concrete reason to investigate further. Samuel Martinez was a respected member of the community with no history of trouble, and the 3 strangers, while rough-looking, weren't doing anything obviously illegal. Well, drive safely, he told the 3 men. Roads can be tricky around here if you don't know them. Jake managed a weak smile. Thank you, officer. We appreciate the help. As the 3 men filed toward the door, Samuel caught each of their eyes in turn. His message was clear. Remember our agreement. Oh, one more thing, Samuel called out as they reached the door. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Danny. If you have any trouble finding what you're looking for out west, call that number. Tell them Samuel sent you. Danny looked at the card. It was blank except for a phone number written in Samuel's neat handwriting. After the 3 men left, Officer Martinez lingered for a moment. You sure everything's okay, Sam? You seem a little on edge. Samuel forced a chuckle. Just getting older, I suppose. Used to be I could clean a gun without making myself nervous. Maybe it's time to admit I'm not as steady as I used to be. The explanation seemed to satisfy the officer, though Samuel could tell he remained slightly suspicious. Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me. Mrs. Peterson was worried when she couldn't get in earlier. I'll give her a call and apologize. Maybe take her some flowers from the cooler to make up for the inconvenience. Officer Martinez smiled at that. Samuel's relationship with his elderly customers was legendary in the small town. She'd like that. Take care of yourself, Sam. After the officer left, Samuel locked the door again and began collecting the weapons from the floor. Jake's cheap revolver, Bull's switchblade, and the brass knuckles would all have to be disposed of carefully. He couldn't risk them being found and traced back to today's events. As he worked, Samuel reflected on the choice he'd made. 3 months later, Samuel was arranging the morning delivery of fresh bread when the phone rang. He recognized the number immediately, having memorized it years ago during his transition from military to civilian life. Martinez General Store, he answered. Though he knew this wasn't a customer calling, Samuel, it's Marcus. The voice belonged to Marcus Wright, a former Army colleague who now ran a specialized security consulting firm that helped people disappear when their lives depended on it. I wanted to give you an update on those 3 packages you sent our way. Samuel glanced around the store, ensuring he was alone. Jenny wouldn't arrive for another hour, and the early morning customers were still at home having their coffee. I'm listening. The youngest one, Danny, is doing well. We got him enrolled in a welding program in Montana. He's living under a new identity, working part-time at a ranch while he learns the trade. Good kid, just needed direction. Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Danny had been the one he'd worried about most, the one who seemed most likely to slide back into crime if given the chance. What about the other 2? Bull's been harder to place, but we found him work at a construction company in Oregon. His supervisor says he's reliable, shows up on time, works hard. He's been sending money back to help Danny's program, which speaks well of his character. That didn't surprise Samuel. Despite his intimidating appearance and poor judgment, Bull had shown genuine care for his nephew during that tense afternoon 3 months ago. And Jake? Marcus paused.
Jake's been our problem child.
He lasted 2 weeks at the first job we found him, then disappeared. We tracked him down in Nevada, trying to put together another crew for small-time robberies. Samuel's grip tightened on the phone. What happened? We had a long conversation with him about the importance of keeping agreements. He's now working on a fishing boat in Alaska. Very remote, very isolated, very hard to leave without our knowing about it. He'll stay there until we're convinced he's learned his lesson. Samuel almost smiled at the image of Jake, who had struggled with taking orders from a shopkeeper, trying to adapt to the harsh discipline of commercial fishing in Alaskan waters. What about the people who were looking for them? That situation resolved itself about 6 weeks ago. Seems their former employer had a disagreement with some business partners, the kind of disagreement that ends with federal indictments. Your 3 friends are no longer on anyone's wanted list. Samuel felt the last of his tension fade away. The choice he'd made that afternoon had been risky, both legally and morally, but it appeared to have worked out as well as he could have hoped. Marcus, I owe you for this. You don't owe me anything, Sam. We've been friends for too long to keep score. Besides, it's good to see guys like these turn their lives around instead of ending up dead or in prison. After hanging up, Samuel returned to his morning routine, but his mind kept drifting back to that afternoon 3 months ago. He'd thought about it often, wondering if he'd made the right choice. The 3 men who'd walked into his store planning to rob him had left with something much more valuable than the few $100s in his cash register. They'd left with hope. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Peterson entered, carrying her weekly shopping list and wearing her usual cheerful smile. Good morning, Samuel.
Beautiful day, isn't it?
It certainly is, Mrs. Peterson. What can I help you find today? As he helped her locate items on her list, Samuel thought about the strange turns life could take. A few months ago, he'd been forced to draw his weapon for the first time since leaving the military. But instead of ending in violence, the situation had become an opportunity for redemption. The morning passed quietly, with the usual parade of customers stopping by for their daily needs. Around noon, Jenny arrived for her shift, bright and energetic as always. She had no idea how close she'd come to witnessing something terrible that day Samuel had sent her on an early break. Mr. Martinez, she said as she tied her apron, did you ever figure out what happened to that gun cleaning kit you were looking for a few months back? Samuel had told everyone he'd been cleaning his weapon when they'd asked about the store being closed that afternoon. It had been a convenient cover story that explained any nervousness people might have noticed in his behavior. Found it in the back storage room, he replied easily, right where I'd left it. As the afternoon wore on, Samuel found himself thinking about the nature of second chances. His own military service had been partly motivated by youthful mistakes that could have led him down a very different path. Someone had seen potential in him despite his rough edges and given him the opportunity to serve his country honorably. The 3 men who'd tried to rob his store had been products of their circumstances just as he had been. Danny, raised by an uncle who meant well but made poor choices. Bull, trying to take care of family despite having limited legal options for earning money. Even Jake, whose pride and anger had probably been shaped by disappointments and failures that Samuel could only guess at. None of that excused their actions, but it helped explain them. And explanation, Samuel had learned over the years, was often the first step toward redemption. The bell chimed again, and Tommy Williams ran in, clutching his allowance money. The boy had finally saved enough for the baseball glove he'd been wanting, and his face glowed with excitement as Samuel helped him count out the exact change. This is going to make me the best shortstop in Little League, Tommy declared with the absolute certainty that only children possessed. I'm sure it will, Samuel agreed, remembering his own childhood dreams and the adults who'd encouraged them. Practice hard and listen to your coach. As Tommy ran out with his new glove, Samuel reflected on how many small moments like this one made up a life. The daily interactions, the small kindnesses, the routine services that kept a community functioning. It was so different from his military days when life had been measured in terms of missions completed and threats neutralized. But both lives had their own form of service. their own way of making the world a little better. Sometimes that meant defending your country against foreign threats. Sometimes it meant giving 3 desperate men a chance to become better than they were. The phone rang again, interrupting his thoughts. This time it was a regular customer asking if he could set aside some items for pickup later. Samuel took down the order, appreciating the trust implicit in the request. After 30 years in Cedar Ridge, his word was considered absolute currency. As he wrote down the customer's needs, Samuel realized that trust was what had made his decision possible that day 3 months ago. His standing in the community had given him the credibility to make Officer Martinez accept his explanation. His reputation had provided the foundation that allowed him to offer those 3 men a different path forward. Trust, Samuel thought, was something that had to be earned over years and could be destroyed in moments. He'd risked his carefully built reputation on 3 strangers who'd held him at gunpoint. But sometimes the biggest risks led to the most meaningful rewards. The afternoon sun slanted through the store windows, casting familiar shadows across the floor where weapons had once been scattered. Now there were only the usual items: shopping baskets, promotional displays, and the comfortable clutter of a well-established neighborhood business. Samuel Martinez locked up his store that evening with the same quiet satisfaction he'd felt for nearly 30 years. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve his community. But tonight he was content knowing that somewhere in Montana, Oregon, and Alaska, 3 men were building better lives than the ones they'd been living 3 months ago. The shopkeeper's gun had indeed done the talking that day. But its most important message hadn't been delivered through violence. Instead, it had spoken of second chances, of redemption, and of the possibility that even the worst mistakes could become the foundation for something better. As Samuel walked home through the quiet streets of Cedar Ridge, he smiled at the thought that sometimes the most important battles were won not by pulling the trigger, but by choosing not to.